My mother-in-law paid me $25 million to give up my twins. Then I found the same amount missing from her bank, 2 days after I gave birth to my daughters. My mother-in-law placed a $25 million check on my hospital blanket and told me to choose. My twins were asleep beside me. Ivy was wrapped in pink. Rose was wrapped in white. My husband's girlfriend stood behind my mother-in-law with a designer diaper bag hanging from her shoulder like she had already been assigned a role in my daughters' lives, and the family lawyer was pointing at the line where I was supposed to sign them away. Celeste Bellamy looked down at me with a calm, expensive smile. "Take the money," she said. "The girls need a name, not a mother with a calculator." My husband Grant stared at the floor. His girlfriend, Alyssa Wren, looked at my daughters like she was choosing furniture for a house she had not paid for. The lawyer clicked her pen. I looked at the check. $25 million. Not 20, not 30, 25. A number that felt too specific to be generous. Then I looked at Ivy. Then Rose. Both of them asleep. Both of them still wearing hospital bands. Both of them too new to know that the people in the room had already turned them into assets. So I signed. I signed the divorce papers. I signed the settlement agreement. I signed the custody proposal Celeste believed would erase me. Grant exhaled. Alyssa smiled. Celeste folded her hands in her lap, like a woman who had just balanced a ledger. And that was the first time I almost laughed. Because they thought I signed because I was broken. They did not know I had already noticed the number. My name is Naomi Ellis. I am 32 years old, and I find risk before it becomes collapse. That is the cleanest way to explain my job. The official title is financial risk analyst. I worked for a regional bank that was not glamorous, not old, and not carved into marble, but it was honest enough to know fear is useful when you are holding other people's money. I spent my days looking for small things. A fee that repeated too often. A transfer split into pieces. An elderly client suddenly authorizing transactions after years of conservative behavior. A vendor with no employees. A loan with paperwork too. Clean to be real. Most people look for fraud in big numbers. I learned early that big lies usually begin as small numbers. Nobody wants to question. My father taught me that. Edward Ellis worked in a community bank for 31 years. He wore short-sleeved dress shirts in every season. And he kept a calculator in his shirt pocket, even after phones made them unnecessary. He used to bring home stories from work, never with names, never with details that would break confidentiality, but always with lessons. When money disappears, he told me once, it rarely jumps, it leaks. I was 13 when he said that. He had just shown me how a teller had caught a pattern of small withdrawals from accounts belonging to elderly customers. Not enough to panic anyone, not enough to trigger an obvious alarm, but enough, over time, to become theft. Remember this. Naomi, he said, big lies usually start as small numbers nobody bothers to question. That sentence stayed with me. It became the reason I checked the second decimal place. It became the reason I never trusted a number, just because someone important said it with confidence. It became the reason Celeste Bellamy should never have called me a calculator. I met Grant Bellamy at a private banking conference in Chicago. He was handsome in the way old money men are often handsome, polished, relaxed, raised to believe every room would make space for him. He was not brilliant, but he was pleasant. At the time, I mistook that for kindness. Grant's family owned Bellamy Private Bank, a discreet institution that served wealthy families, retired executives, politicians, old widows with large estates, and people who preferred their financial lives to happen behind heavy wooden doors. Their slogan was printed on the conference brochure: "A century of trust." Grant said it with pride. "My grandmother used to say people don't come to Bellamy for products," he told me. "They come to sleep at night." "That's a dangerous thing to sell," I said. "What? Sleep?" He laughed like I had made a joke. I had not. We dated for 10 months. Grant was charming, attentive, and careful with gestures. Not passionate, exactly, but reliable, in the way a polished watch is reliable. He called when he said he would. He remembered my coffee order. He sent flowers to my office after my father's death anniversary, even though I had only mentioned the date once. I thought that meant listened. Later, I understood Grant was very good at remembering things. That made him look like a good man. That was different. The first time I entered Bellamy House, Celeste was waiting in the front hall. The house sat behind iron gates at the end of a long drive lined with sycamore trees. It was all white stone, black shutters, an old money restraint. Nothing screamed wealth. It whispered it, which was worse. Celeste Bellamy wore a gray silk dress and pearls that looked inherited by someone who had never once doubted she deserved them. She kissed the air beside my cheek. "Naomi Ellis," she said, "Grant tells me you work in risk." "Yes? How practical?" She said practical, the way some people say damp. At dinner, the family talked about clients like they were heirlooms: the Harrington account, the Wexler estate, the Mrs. Halloway Trust, the Carver Medical Fund. No first names, just accounts, estates, funds, relationships. Celeste sat at the head of the table. Grant's father had died years earlier. Everyone spoke of him gently, but nobody pretended he still ruled anything. Celeste ruled. Grant smiled when she approved of him. He stiffened when she did not. That first night, Celeste asked me what I did all day. "I identify financial risk patterns before they become losses," I said. She tilted her head. "So you check arithmetic." Grant's cousin laughed. Celeste smiled. "Every family needs someone to check the arithmetic." That became my role. Not daughter-in-law, not professional, not equal. The calculator. At first, I tried to let it pass. I told myself old banking families were formal. I told myself Celeste's coldness was tradition. I told myself Grant's silence was discomfort, not cowardice. I told myself many things, because love is sometimes a room where we keep explaining away the smoke. For the first year, our marriage was quiet enough to feel stable. I kept my job at my bank. I kept my last name professionally. That bothered Celeste. "A Bellamy wife should understand the value of alignment," she said once. "I do," I told her. "That's why I keep my own license clean." She looked at me for a long time after that. I did not know then how much she hated anyone she could not absorb. The first strange thing I noticed at Bellamy Private Bank was a fee, a very small one. Grant had invited me to a client appreciation event in the bank's main hall. There were white roses, crystal glasses, and a pianist playing softly near a portrait of the founder, Charles Bellamy. A woman named Mrs. Halloway stood beside me while Grant spoke to a donor. She was in her late 70s, maybe early 80s, with a cane in one hand and a folder pressed against her chest. "You work in banking too, don't you?" she asked. "I do." "Maybe you can explain something." She opened the folder and, showed me a statement. There was a line item circled twice in blue pen: Special Administration Review Fee. It appeared twice in the same month. I asked about it, she said. "They told me it was standard." "Did they explain what was reviewed?" "No, they said these matters were complex." Grant appeared beside me before I could answer. "Mrs. Halloway," he said warmly, "I hope they're taking care of you." She closed the folder. They always say they are. On the drive home, I asked Grant about the fee. He sighed. Naomi. Private banking clients question everything. They're wealthy because they hate fees. It was duplicated. You saw one statement. I saw enough to ask. He smiled, but not kindly. You don't have to risk analyze my family's clients. My family's clients, not our clients, not the bank's clients. My family's. I let it drop, but I remembered the fee. Later, I noticed names. Wren Advisory Group, North Channel Holdings, Silvergate Fiduciary Services, Bellamy Legacy Partners. The names appeared. In conversations. In event programs. In a vendor slide Grant left open on his laptop once while taking a call. I did not snoop. Not then, I simply saw. That is what people like Grant never understood. You do not have to search for patterns when your brain is built to keep them. Then Alyssa Wren arrived. Officially, she was a brand consultant hired to modernize the bank's events and public image. She was elegant, sharp, and careful around Celeste, in the way ambitious women are careful. Around older women who control access. Grant said she was excellent at presentation. He said it too often. Alyssa laughed at his jokes before he finished them. Grant started working late, then later, then taking calls in the library, then keeping his phone face down. People think as one dramatic discovery. Sometimes it arrives as 100 small data points until the conclusion becomes boring. I found the hotel charge 6 months before the twins were born. A boutique hotel downtown. 2 nights. Same weekend Grant claimed he had been reviewing compliance procedures at the bank. I did not confront him. Not because I was weak, because I was pregnant, tired, and already aware that if Grant was lying about Alyssa, he might be lying about more. So, I hedged. I opened an account only in my name. I copied records from accounts I legally had access to. I saved household statements, tax documents, insurance policies, trust notices sent to Grant, and presentations left on our shared devices. I leased a furnished apartment across town, under my own name. I packed a hospital bag, then I packed a second bag. That did not look like a hospital bag. Grant saw it once in the closet. What's that for? Contingency. He laughed. You really are risk management in human form. Yes, I said. He thought that was cute. Celeste changed when she learned I was having twins. Not softened. Changed. There is a difference. She began calling more. Visiting. More. Sending lists. Approved doctors. Approved nursery colors. Approved photographers. Approved names. She referred to the babies as the Bellamy girls, before they had lungs. At lunch one afternoon, she placed a leather folder on the table. Inside were family names. Charlotte, Vivian, Margaret, Elizabeth. No, I said. Her eyes lifted. No, I'm naming my daughters. You are carrying Bellamy children. I am carrying my children. She smiled. It was not a smile of amusement. It was a smile of record-keeping. 2 girls, she said. That gives us options. I remember the exact chill that moved through me. Mothers talk about cribs. Grandmothers talk about blankets. Celeste talked about options. When I asked Grant what she meant, he waved it away. She means family planning. No, she doesn't. You read too much into things. That was another sentence people used when they wanted me to stop reading accurately. The twins came early on a Monday night. Ivy first, Rose 7 minutes later, small, furious, perfect. Grant missed the delivery. He arrived 90 minutes later wearing a navy suit and guilt he had not bothered to tailor. Alyssa sent flowers before my mother did, white roses in a crystal vase, no card from Grant, just a card that said, "Welcome to the world, Kaysa Bellamy girls. I asked the nurse to remove them. When she brought the birth certificate forms, I did not hesitate. Ivy Ellis, Rose Ellis. Grant saw the paperwork later. Ellis? Yes. They're Bellamy's. They are my daughters. My mother will not like this. I didn't give birth for your mother's approval. He looked tired then. Almost sad, but not enough to be brave. Celeste came the next morning. She looked at the bassinet cards. Ivy Ellis. Rose Ellis. Her face did not change, but the room got colder. Names can be handled later, she said. No, I said, they've been handled. She looked at me with something close to contempt. You are making this harder than it needs to be. I was still in pain, still bleeding, still learning how to feed two babies with a body that felt like it had been split and reassembled incorrectly. But I remember thinking clearly that was not a comment, it was a warning. On the second day after their birth, Celeste returned, not alone. Grant, Aileen came in behind her, then Alyssa. Then a lawyer named Diana Marsh, a woman with a silver briefcase, and the soft voice of someone used to delivering brutal documents politely. Alyssa held a designer diaper bag. That was the detail that burned into me. Not the affair. Not the humiliation. The diaper bag. She had come prepared to carry my daughters out. Celeste placed the check on my hospital blanket. $25 million. The number sat between my body and my babies, like a blade. This is generous, Celeste said. I laughed once. I could not help it. Grant flinched. Celeste did not. You will sign the divorce agreement, she said. You will accept the settlement. You will agree that Ivy and Rose belong with the Bellamy family. You will leave quietly. You will not speak about Grant, about this family, or about the bank. The bank? I asked. Diana Marsh glanced at Celeste. Celeste's eyes narrowed. All matters connected to the family. There it was. The first. Seek wrong note. If this was about custody, why mention the bank? Grant said softly. Naomi, don't turn this into a war. My mother is trying to be generous. Generous. He called an attempt to buy newborns generous. I looked at Alyssa. She gave me a small, pitting smile. I wondered if she'd practiced it. Then Celeste leaned closer. Take the money. The girls need a name, not a mother with a calculator. The room went quiet. A nurse passed in the hallway outside, laughing softly at something. Life continuing. Normal sounds near an abnormal cruelty. I looked at Diana. Has a judge reviewed any of this? She folded her hands. That will not be necessary if you cooperate. That was when the room changed for me. Not emotionally, mathematically. No judge, no independent counsel. 2 days postpartum, husband's girlfriend present. Mother-in-law threatening me with money and power. A custody agreement signed under pressure in a hospital bed. They thought they were showing strength. I saw weakness wearing confidence. A signature taken from a hospital bed is not a verdict. It is evidence. I took the pen. Grant looked relieved before the ink even touched paper. That told me everything. I signed slowly, Naomi Bellamy, for the last time. Celeste watched like a banker, watching funds clear. When I finished, I handed the pen back. She stood. You made the right choice. No, I said quietly. I made a choice. She did not understand the difference. That night, after worry, the hospital floor quieted. I called Marion Vale. Despite the last name, she had no relation to Alyssa Wren or the Bellamy Circle. Marion had handled my father's estate after he died, and she had become the closest thing I had to a family attorney. She answered with sleep in her voice. Naomi, they tried to buy my daughters. Silence. Then Marion said, where are the girls? With me. Good. Keep them there. I'm leaving tonight. Are you medically cleared? Yes. Do not drive. I won't. Take every document. Already packed? Good girl, she said. Then she caught herself. Sorry, good woman. I almost cried then. Not when Celeste insulted me, not when Grant betrayed me. When someone corrected herself, because she remembered I deserved respect. I left the hospital just after midnight. No dramatic exit, no chase, no security guards, just me. 2 car seats, a folder of documents, and a friend from my old office who drove us to the apartment I had leased months earlier. Ivy slept the whole way. Rose screamed for 11 minutes, then hiccuped herself into silence. I sat between them in the back seat, one hand on each car seat, thinking the same sentence over and over. I was not running. I was moving the girls out of their reach. Before the numbers started speaking. At 8:30 the next morning, Poncish, Marion sent formal notice, revoking the custody provisions as signed under duress and preserving every parental right I had. At 9:10, Celeste called. I answered. Not because I owed her, because I wanted to hear the moment she understood. I was not where she had placed me. Naomi, she said, where are the girls? With their mother. You signed. I signed paper. I did not sign away law, biology, or reality. You have made a grave mistake. No, I said. You did that when you wrote down 25 million. She went silent. Only for a second, but I heard it. Numbers make guilty people pause. Then she said, you do not want to make an enemy of this bank. I didn't, I said. The bank made one of me. I hung up. 2 days later, I sat in Marion's office with Ivy and Rose sleeping in a double stroller beside me. Marion read the hospital documents twice. Then she set them down with visible disgust. The custody portion is weak, she said. How weak? Hospital bed, no judge, no independent counsel, threatening atmosphere, husband's mistress in the room. Newborns involved. It's poison. I closed my eyes. Can they still fight? Oh, yeah. I opened my eyes. Marion leaned back. You can beat them in court, Naomi. But if the bank is still standing, they can afford to keep hurting you. That was the sentence that changed everything. Because she was right. The Bellamys did not need to win quickly. They only needed to make the fight expensive enough to exhaust me. They had lawyers on retainer, judges who knew their name, clients in politics, donors in hospitals, friends in every room where decisions started as whispers. If Bellamy Private Bank remained untouched, Celeste could lose motion after motion and still make motherhood feel like litigation. So I stopped asking how to win custody. That was not the right question. I started asking, what gave Celeste the power to believe she could buy my daughters? The answer was obvious. The bank. That night, after both girls finally fell asleep, I opened my laptop. I did not open the folder marked Grant. That one held the affair. Hotel, charges, messages, photos from a weekend he said he spent with a compliance committee. Alyssa's name in places. It had no professional reason to be. I could have sent it all to Celeste's board, to the local society pages, to the private banking clients who cared deeply about discretion. It would have been satisfying. For a day. But an affair would embarrass Grant. It would not weaken Celeste, and Celeste was the threat. So I opened the folder marked Bellamy. At first, it was fragments, trust notices, vendor lists, internal presentations Grant had left synced on our shared home computer, event budgets, client service summaries, risk committee agendas. Nothing stolen, nothing hacked, nothing dramatic, just the kind of documents powerful people leave around because they think wives do not read them correctly. I began mapping entities. Bellamy Private Bank in the center, around it, trust management subsidiaries, investment vehicles, family partnerships, advisory, vendors, holding companies, and special administrative service providers. Then the names repeated. Wren Advisory Group, North Channel Holdings, Silvergate Fiduciary Services, Bellamy Legacy Partners, Wren Advisory Group build the bank for brand positioning. Client retention, strategy, family office integration, and special communications. Special communications. That phrase bothered me. Silvergate Fiduciary Services build for document maintenance and estate review. North Channel Holdings received internal loans that appeared to be secured by assets I could not locate. Bellamy Legacy Partners received transfers, described as succession planning support. Every phrase sounded respectable. That is how financial rot hides. It wears a tie. I started with the fees. Mrs. Holloway's duplicated charge had stayed in my mind. Special administration review fee. I searched the documents I had. The fee appeared often, too often, usually in accounts belonging to elderly clients, often widows, often clients with no active adult child listed as account co-manager. The fee was small enough to be ignored. $800 here, $1,200 there. A second fee under a slightly different label. Estate review adjustment. Document preservation charge. Fiduciary. Oversight supplement. Each one sounded plausible. Together, they formed a pattern. My father's voice came back. Money rarely jumps. It leaks. For weeks, I worked while the girls slept. That meant I worked badly, in fragments. 20 minutes between feedings. An hour at dawn. 45 minutes with Rose asleep on my chest. And Ivy making small noises beside me. I built spreadsheets with one hand. I highlighted statements while bottles warmed. I paid for secure database access. I hired a retired bank examiner named Paul Renner to review my methodology without touching anything confidential he should not. Paul was blunt. I liked that. After reading my first summary, he said, "This is either sloppy administration or structured extraction." "Which one does it look like?" He tapped the vendor map. "Sloppy doesn't usually have this many related parties." That was confirmation enough to keep going. The missing number came from a reserve report Grant had downloaded to our shared desktop months earlier and never deleted. The file name was boring. Q3 Fiduciary Liquidity Review. Boring files are where people hide their sins. The report said Bellamy Private Bank was required internally to maintain $112 million in a fiduciary liquidity reserve tied to certain managed trusts and vulnerable client accounts. $112 million, but an attached working schedule showed available reserve coverage, SBA, of $87 million. So at the screen, 112 minus 87, 25. I did the math again, then again, not because I needed to, because my body understood before my mind wanted to. $25 million missing. $25 million on my hospital blanket. They had not chosen the number because it was generous. They had chosen it because it was missing. I printed the report, I saved copies, I backed them up in 3 places, then I walked to the girls' bassinet and stood over them. Ivy had one hand near her face. Rose was frowning in her sleep, like she was judging the world already. "They tried to buy you," I whispered, "with the hole in their own bank." That was the moment the story stopped being only mine. Because behind those missing millions were people like Mrs. Holloway, people who had trusted Bellamy Private Bank with inheritances, medical funds, retirement accounts, family trusts, everything they were too tired or too old or too grieving to manage alone. Celeste had built a century of trust by charging people for the privilege of not looking closely. Then she used the missing number to try to buy my daughters. The next file came from Grant's old laptop. It had been in our home office, connected to our shared backup system. Most of it was useless. Golf schedules, board dinner menus, photos from events. Then I found the workbook, minor voting control. My skin went cold before I opened it. The tabs were worse than I expected. Guardian proxy rights, custody cost scenarios, twin share allocation, Ellis removal strategy, future voting strength. My daughters had been alive for less than a month and they already had a control model. The workbook outlined how certain Bellamy family shares with special voting influence would pass to the next legitimate generation. If Ivy and Rose were under Bellamy guardianship, Celeste could control proxy rights while they were minors. If Naomi retained sole custody and the girls remained Ellis by legal name, additional court approvals and trustee challenges could court limit Celeste's control. There were projected legal costs, reputation risks, settlement thresholds, offer range 15 to 30 million, recommended initial offer 25 million. There it was. Again. 25. The number was everywhere. Once I knew where to look. It was the missing reserve, the hospital check, the recommended removal cost, a number carrying 3 lies at once. I sent the workbook to Marion. She called me 11 minutes later. Naomi, she said carefully, I need you to breathe. I'm breathing. No, you're speaking. That's different. I inhaled. She waited. Then she said, this is not only custody evidence. I know. This is governance evidence. EC, no. And possibly bank fraud. Yes. A pause. You already had most of this built, didn't you? I had enough to know where to look. What do you want? I looked at the girls. Ivy was awake, staring at nothing with the solemn confusion of a person new to light. Rose was asleep beside her. I want a filing number. Not revenge loud enough to trend. A filing number quiet enough to survive a courtroom. That became the rule. Everything had to be clean. No stolen material. No emotional accusations without documentation. No shortcuts. No secret recordings. No wild claims. Just documents, timelines, patterns, and names. I mapped the duplicated fees. I tied Wren Advisory Group to Alyssa's brother. I traced North Channel loans to companies connected with Bellamy family partnerships. I compared signatures on authorizations to hospitalization dates. One client, Evelyn Price, had supposedly approved a risk reallocation on a day she was admitted for severe cognitive decline. Another client's account was charged an estate preservation fee 3 weeks after he died. Mr. Bell, a retired school superintendent, had a managed account used as collateral support for an internal loan he never appeared to authorize. The Carver Medical Fund had been charged layered administrative fees, while the family fought to pay for in-home care. I built the case slowly, carefully, furiously. But the fury never touched the work. Anger is useful fuel. It is a terrible editor. Grant came to the apartment before I filed. He should not have known where I was living. That told me something else about the Bellamy reach. I opened the door with a cheesy he looked thinner, not guilty, cornered. Naomi, he said, we need to talk. No, you can't just keep my daughters from me. You haven't asked to see them through counsel. My mother is trying to, make this civil. Your mother brought your girlfriend to my hospital room. He looked away. There he was, the man who had mistaken weakness for peace, until peace became impossible. Then he said, what did you take from the house? Not, how are Ivy and Rose? Not, are they healthy? Not, do they sleep? What did you take? I smiled then, not happily, precisely. The girls, I said, the truth, and copies. His face changed. What copies? A father asks if his daughters are safe. You asked what documents I had. Naomi, if you think you found something, you need to stop. Why? You don't understand the consequences. I understand consequences better than anyone in your family. I measure them for a living. His voice dropped. My mother will bury you. No, I said. She will try. And then she will have to explain why $25 million appears in 3 places it should not. For a second, all the color left his face. That was the final confirmation. I closed the door. Celeste requested a meeting 2 days later. She chose a private room at the Bellamy Club, of course, wood paneling, old portraits, silver coffee service, a waiter trained to vanish. Celeste sat beneath a painting of Charles Bellamy, signing the bank's founding documents. Perfect. She wore navy, not black. Black would admit mourning. Celeste did not admit anything. "You look tired," she said. "I have newborn twins." "You chose that." "I chose my daughters. You chose a check?" Her eyes hardened. "You cannot win against a bank, Naomi." "I don't need to win against the bank. I only need to show the regulators where to look." That was the first time I saw true fear on her face. It was small, quick, but real. Then she recovered. "You are angry because Grant humiliated you." "No." "You are angry because Alyssa is younger." "No." "You are angry because you were never suited to this family." That one almost made me laugh. "Celeste," I said, "you keep trying to find a wound small enough to explain me." She sat back. "I can increase the settlement. There it is. 40 million. Full custody arrangement negotiable. You keep the girls primarily until school age. Then we revisit." Revisit? They are Bellamy's. They are babies. They are legacy. They are not your voting instruments. Her expression froze. I had said too much, or exactly enough. I stood. "Thank you for confirming the motive. You have no idea what you are touching." "Yes," I said. "I do. That's why you're afraid." I filed 3 days later. A formal complaint to the state banking regulator, a parallel referral through Marion to financial crimes investigators, a structured report, prepared the way I would prepare it for a hostile review. Executive summary, timeline, entity map, fee pattern analysis, reserve discrepancy, related party vendor chart, client vulnerability indicators, authorization anomalies, minor voting control workbook, hospital incident, declaration, custody pressure context, copies, receipts, sources, everything dated, everything reproducible, everything written in language too calm to dismiss as revenge. Then I submitted it. The confirmation email arrived at 2:16 in the afternoon. I printed it. I put it in a folder. Then Rose cried, and I changed a diaper, because justice may begin with a filing number, but motherhood continues on its own schedule. Nothing happened publicly at first. That is how real pressure works, quietly. A regulator assigns a review, a compliance officer gets a document request, a bank executive asks who else knows, a board member calls a private lawyer. A woman like Celeste stops sleeping through the night. 3 weeks later, Paul Renner called. They opened a formal inquiry, he said. I sat down on the kitchen floor, one baby monitor in my hand, one bottle warming on the counter. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "And Naomi?" "What?" "This is moving faster than normal." "Why?" "Because 25 million missing from fiduciary reserves is not normal." The Bellamy annual client meeting was announced the next week. A century of trust. That was the theme. The invitation had thick paper, black lettering, and the Bellamy crest at the top. Marion told me not to go. Paul said there was no need. My mother told me I had already done enough. They were all right. I went anyway. Not to confront Celeste, not to perform, to witness. There is a difference between lighting a match and standing in the room when the lights come on. The meeting was held in the bank's grand hall, the same room where I had once met Mrs. Halloway. Dark wood, marble floors, soft lighting, portrait of Charles Bellamy, rows of chairs filled with clients, trustees, adult children of elderly account holders, board members, and local reporters who had heard enough whispers to show up early. Celeste stood at the front in an ivory suit, calm and immaculate. Grant stood near the side, looking like a man waiting for bad weather he could not cancel. Alyssa was there too. That surprised me. She wore a pale blue dress and a diamond bracelet I recognized from a charge Grant had once failed to explain. When Alyssa saw me, her face shifted. For the first time, she did not look smug. She looked uncertain. That suited her better. I took a seat near the back. Celeste saw me before the meeting started. She gave me a small smile. It said, "I still own the room." Maybe she did, but not the numbers. Inside it. At 10:05, Celeste stepped to the podium. For 100 years, she began, the Bellamy name has meant trust. I almost admired the timing. She spoke about stewardship, discretion, generational relationships, the sacred duty of protecting what families build. Behind her, a screen showed black and white photographs of old bank tellers, vault doors, handshake ceremonies, and smiling clients. Then the side doors opened. 3 people entered. 2 state banking regulators. 1 ICS investigator with a document case. No sirens, no shouting, no theatrical raid, just process, walking across marble. Celeste stopped mid-sentence. The lead regulator approached the podium. "Mrs. Bellamy, this is a private client meeting," Celeste said. "Yes," the regulator replied. "And we need to address the clients." The room stirred. Phones came out. Grant closed his eyes. The regulator announced that Bellamy Private Bank was under formal regulatory action, pending investigation into fiduciary reserve discrepancies, unauthorized fee practices, related party transactions, and possible misuse of vulnerable client funds. Certain fiduciary operations were frozen. Document preservation was mandatory. New discretionary transfers from affected account. Charker for Shenshaw. Suspended. An independent review would begin immediately. A murmur moved through the room like wind before a storm. Mrs. Holloway was there. I saw her in the 3rd row, gripping the same blue folder. A man near the aisle said, "What does frozen mean?" A woman said, "My father's trust is here." Another voice said, "Are our accounts safe?" Celeste lifted one hand. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "A technical review, nothing more." The regulator continued. Her voice was steady. That was what undid Celeste. Not accusation, not anger, authority without fear. Celeste could dominate people. She could not dominate procedure. Then her eyes found me. Her mask cracked. "You," she said. Every head turned. I stood. Celeste pointed across the hall. "This woman is trying to destroy 100 years of trust." I walked forward slowly, not to obey her, to answer in front of the people. She had taught to trust silence. "No." "Celeste," I said, "I found the $25 million. You hoped no one would count." The room went still. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You bitter little calculator." There it was. The word she thought made me small. I looked at her. "You thought I was just a calculator. That was your mistake. Calculators remember every number." A reporter typed fast. Mrs. Holloway stood slowly, one hand on her cane. "I asked about those fees," she said, 3 times. Celeste did not look at her, so I did. "You were right to ask," I said. That was all it took. A man stood. My father was charged for advisory reviews after his stroke. Another woman lifted a folder. My aunt's account had transfers she never approved. Then another. Then another. The meeting Celeste had designed to reassure clients became the first room, where the clients compared notes out loud. That is the danger of trust once it breaks. Everyone starts checking their own receipts. Alyssa left before the meeting ended. I saw her near the side door, speaking quickly into her phone. By evening, Wren Advisory Group had taken down its website. By the next morning, Alyssa's photos with Grant were gone. She had wanted a Bellamy future. She found a subpoena risk. Grant called me that night. I did not answer. His voicemail was short. Naomi, please, my mother is saying this could ruin everything. Not, how are Ivy and Rose? Not, I'm sorry, everything. That was what he mourned. The consequences came in waves. The bank's fiduciary division was placed under outside supervision. Celeste was suspended from operational control pending review. The board opened an internal investigation to save itself. Wren Advisory Group became a focus of related party inquiries. North Channel Holdings could not document proper collateral authorization. Silvergate Fiduciary Services had billed for work nobody could prove had been performed. Clients filed claims, families hired lawyers. The press used the phrase missing $25 million by the second headline. Grant was questioned about approvals he had signed without understanding, or with understanding he now regretted. Neither version helped him. The custody case, compared to the bank collapse, became almost quiet. Marion challenged the hospital agreement. The judge, I saw the facts plainly. New mother, 2 days postpartum, no independent counsel in the room, husband's girlfriend present, mother-in-law offering money, a private custody document with no judicial review, pressure tied to family banking interests. The judge did not use dramatic language. Judges rarely do. But when she described the circumstances as coercive and deeply troubling, I felt something in me unclench. The custody terms fell apart. Celeste's request for guardianship rights was denied. Grant was granted only supervised visitation until he could demonstrate stability and independence from the family pressure surrounding the case. The special voting interests tied to Ivy and Rose were placed under independent court supervision, beyond Celeste's reach. That was the part she hated most. Not losing access, losing control months later, like Ivy and Rose were asleep in matching yellow pajamas, right in a small house I rented near my mother. Not a mansion, not a gated estate. A house with uneven floors, a kitchen window that stuck, and sunlight that came in beautifully at 7 in the morning. I received a letter from Mrs. Halloway. Her handwriting shook, but the message was clear. She wrote that she had known something was wrong, but had been made to feel foolish for asking. She thanked me for counting what they hoped she would stop questioning. I placed her letter in a box with the girl's hospital bracelets and a photo of my father standing in front of his old bank. Big lies usually start as small numbers nobody bothers to question. I thought of that often. Celeste sent one letter through counsel. It was not an apology. People like Celeste do not apologize. They reframe. She wrote that I had damaged an institution, built over generations. She wrote that Ivy and Rose would one day resent me for separating them from their legacy. She wrote that Bellamy blood could not be erased by paperwork. I did not respond. Instead, I took the girls to the park. Ivy tried to eat a leaf. Rose screamed at a pigeon. That was my answer to legacy. Grant eventually apologized during a supervised visit. The girls were nearly a year old. He sat across from me in a family services room while Ivy chewed a block and Rose tried to pull off her sock. I should have stopped my mother, he said. Yes. I was scared. Yes. I thought if I went against her, I'd lose everything. I looked at our daughters. You almost lost the only things worth. Keeping, he cried then, quietly. I did not comfort him. That was not cruelty. That was no longer being his emotional bank. The Bellamy Private Bank did not vanish overnight. Institutions like that rarely do. Parts were sold, parts were placed under supervision. Some clients were moved. Some funds were recovered. Some losses could never be fully repaired. Money can be returned. Trust cannot always be. Celeste lost her office, then her board seat. Then the portrait of Charles Bellamy was removed from the Grand Hall during renovation, though someone told me it was only temporary. Powerful families call many permanent losses temporary at first. I was later asked to assist as an outside consultant on a narrow portion of the review, with strict conflict rules and independent oversight. I accepted, not because I wanted to keep fighting the Bellamys, because the work mattered. The first restitution schedule I reviewed included Mrs. Holloway's duplicated fees, $800, $1,200, small numbers, the kind people dismiss, the kind my father taught me to respect. People ask whether I regret signing. I do not. That signature gave me time. It gave me evidence. It gave me the number. It made Celeste comfortable enough to believe she had won. That was her mistake. She believed control was the same thing as safety. She believed money could turn motherhood into a transaction. She believed daughters could be held as votes. She believed calling me a calculator made me less than human. But calculators do one thing very well. They remember what was entered. I will tell Ivy and Rose the truth someday. Not all at once. Not the hospital room first. Not the check. Not the girlfriend with the diaper bag. First, I will tell them they were wanted. By me. Before the money. Before the papers. Before anyone tried to turn their names into voting rights. I will tell them their grandfather, Edward, believed no number was too small to matter. I will tell them trust is not something a bank owns, because it prints the word on thick paper. Trust is what remains when the numbers are honest. Celeste called them air because she only understood control. I called them my daughters because I understood love. They offered me $25 million to leave my daughters, but they forgot what I did for a living. I find missing numbers, and the number they gave me led me straight to the truth.